On today's episode of Let's Talk Drones, we are kicking off a new series that I have been so excited about. I've been planning it, I've been conceptualizing it, and I've been preparing for it for over a year now. And it's finally coming to light, and I'm so excited and so happy about it. We are doing an FPV build series of videos. So I'll be taking you through step by step, video by video, how to build your very own FPV drone. Now, I have added a slight twist to this particular build. I'm sure you've already figured it out just by reading the title and description of the video, but let's talk about it. Let's talk drones. What's up? It's Chris, the Drone Geek, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Drones. That's right. We are starting an FPV build series. So if you're a first timer, you've never built a drone before, I'm here to take you through that process. I want just to say a few things before we get into this video. First and foremost, I am no Joshua Bardwell. So I'm not gonna have quite the grasp on some of the nuances of FPV drones that Josh has. If you're really looking for some in-depth explanations, getting into the nitty-gritty and the hows and the whys and the whats of very minute details of a build and how to configure your drone, this isn't the series for you. This is not the series for you. I would highly recommend you go check out Joshua Bardwell's channel. He's got just about everything you could possibly want for an FPV build tutorial. If you are looking for something that's a little bit more easily digestible right off the cuff, something that's going to be a little bit more of a broad picture type of thing, and something that's going to get you from the box of parts that you currently got to a flyable drone, this is the video series for you. I promise I'm going to be as quick and dirty with this as possible. And by the end of the series, you should, as long as all of your components are working together and wired together correctly, have a working drone. So that's the first disclaimer. The next disclaimer is this. With that roughness, I'm also learning how to properly produce a video series like this. So there will be some rough edges on production value here. Just stick with me as best you can. I promise if you just listen to what I'm saying and you watch what you can and all those things sort of amalgamate together, you will have a working drone by the end of the video. There will be nothing that I put in these videos that will be so unrefined that it won't get the point across. So that's my promise to you. It may be a little rough to look at or listen to sometimes, but at the end of this, you will have a working drone and you will get the knowledge that you need to continue learning how to build drones that are more and more and more advanced or different or whatever the case may be. And the final disclaimer, I've put a little bit of a twist on my original idea for this series. Originally, when I was conceptualizing this, I just wanted to do an FPV build series. That's what I wanted to do, is just start with components, didn't matter where they were from, and put together a drone. But in light of recent events here in the United States relating to NDAA compliance, blue list, yada, 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 I felt that it might be important, at least to a portion of our audience, to see that it is possible, albeit not very convenient, but it is possible to put together an NDAA compliant build. So the parts that you're going to see in this video are largely, and I'll get to the largely caveat in just a few seconds here, are largely NDAA compliant. I would be willing to bet actually that if you did the math, 93 to 95% of this drone is NDAA compliant. Again, we'll talk about the caveat to that in just a few seconds, but that doesn't mean that your build, as you follow along with this video, needs to be NDAA compliant. You can go out and get parts from wherever you want to get parts from and follow along with this tutorial, and it should, maybe with a few minor adjustments here and there, work all the same for you. On that note, NDAA compliance does not apply to everybody at this point. NDAA compliance for FPV only applies to folks that work in the military, law enforcement, and any sector that receives federal funding. So that's going to be true even after the NDAA compliance ban of DJI and Autel takes effect inevitably at the end of this year. As long as you aren't using DJI components, i.e. the DJI Air unit, in your build, you should be able to reasonably source most of these components. There shouldn't be an issue, especially if you're okay with using like walk snail or analog or HD0. Everything should be pretty easy to come by for the most part. Okay, now that all of that disclaimer stuff is out of the way, let's take a look at the parts list for this build. So as we take a look at this parts list together, I just want to make a quick note for you that may help you plan out how you want to do your build. The parts that I'm listing here are going in order of appearance in this series. So you're going to see the frame first, followed by the motors, and then the ESC, the flight controller, the VTX, and finally the camera. So first and foremost, our frame. We're using the TBS Source V5 frame. As for our motors, we're using the Geek RC SpeedX2 2207 1960 kV motors. These are perfect for a nice, powerful, yet agile and fast 5-inch drone. The ESC is going to be the TBS Lucid 8S 4-in-1 ESC. The flight controller is the Orca F405 3030 flight controller. The VTX is the TBS Unify Pro 32DP VTX. Our receiver on board the drone is the Orca IRC Ghost 2.4 GHz receiver. And our camera is the Foxeer Predator 5. If you look at this parts list, some of you that have some experience with building and understanding componentry and where it's sourced from might already have a red flag shooting up on this parts list. First, I want to address two of the easier ones to address. The TBS Source V5 and the motors, the Geek RC SpeedX motors. Those are not inherently NDAA compliant in that they are manufactured in China. Geek RC is a Chinese company, and the TBS Source frame, it is open source, but this particular frame that I ordered was manufactured in China. That, however, does not matter. According to NDAA, as it stands right now, October of 2025, NDAA does not cover motors and frames. It only covers components that transmit information to and from the drone and the operator and any potential servers or clouds out there. It only covers things like your transmitter, things like your receiver, your flight controller, even your ESC. It does cover those components, but it does not cover your frames or your motors. So even though these are manufactured in China, I'm going to use them in this build because these are easily swapped out once you find a viable replacement. As far as the motors go, I really can't find anything that is NDAA compliant. Most FPV motors, especially at this scale, a 5-inch drone, are manufactured in China or at least have some touch and feel out of the Chinese mainland. So that's something that was really challenging. I've reached out to tons of people on LinkedIn. I've put out open calls. Nobody can seem to find motors that are readily available and easily accessible and affordable for this build. I was also trying to keep the cost down as low as I possibly could, even with the NDAA component of this drone. So the motors were extremely challenging to source. That was almost impossible for me, but it doesn't matter anyway because they're not covered by the NDAA compliance issue. The frame, however, I have no issues using something that was manufactured in China because you can source carbon fiber from anywhere, and if you know somebody or a company nearby that has a CNC machine, you can usually hire them out to cut out a drone frame for you. If you own a 3D printer, you can also print your own frames. I was originally going to use one of these two frames here that I printed with a carbon fiber infused PLA plastic, but I found that it was challenging enough to go through an FPV build for the first time. I didn't want to introduce all of the different part sourcing you had to do for these frames because, again, I printed these myself. I don't have the screws and the other components, the standoffs and things like that, to make this easy for you. Not to mention, if you don't have a 3D printer, this doesn't apply to you. You can't source these very easily then. So I wanted to make something as friendly as possible to everybody, and quite frankly, not having to do it on one of these frames makes it a lot easier on me too. A TBS Source is super easy to work in because it's got a nice, big, open body, and it's not hard to fit components in there at all. I've already done one build on the TBS Source and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that drone and that frame. So that's what we're going to stick to, especially since we don't have to have an NDAA compliant frame. The final component that does have options available that I did not go to NDAA compliance lengths for has to do with our camera. The Foxeer Predator 5 is a Chinese camera. Yes, this one 100% disqualifies this build at its premise as a completely NDAA compliant drone build because the camera is taking that visual information and processing it through the flight controller and then out of the VTX back to the goggles. So that nature of that image transmission falls under NDAA compliance, which means that that part is not NDAA compliant and kind of breaks the build. I'm being honest with you here. I don't want you to get all worked up over it, because the reason that I'm okay with this is twofold. First of all, Rotor Riot has the Aura analog FPV camera coming soon. You can currently pre-order it for $58 on Rotor Riot's site. It's a little more expensive than the Foxier Predator. I paid about $36 for the Foxier Predator 5, so it is more expensive, but it is coming soon. So you can currently pre-order that. When we get that, I don't know. And I didn't want to delay this series any longer. I wanted to just get into this and start the build, because content has been running dry now that the DJI consumer products are more difficult to obtain here in the United States. So I just wanted to get this started and get this out there, and I didn't want something as small as an FPV analog camera to stop the production of this series. That said, the other reason that I'm okay with bending the rules a little bit on this NDAA compliance component for the camera is because the camera is really easy to swap out. So once that Aura analog FPV camera comes out, I will very easily be able to take the Foxier Predator 5 out, put the Aura analog in, and everything will work as it should and as it did before. So I'm not concerned in the least bit with the camera. We're just gonna have to make do for now, because again, like the motors, this was really hard to source from an NDAA compliant country and manufacturer. So until we get more options available for cameras, this is what we've got to settle with. So the Foxier Predator 5 is a great analog camera, but again, it sort of disqualifies this drone from that NDAA compliance component. But I hope that you'll bear with me. I hope you'll stick through this series with me, despite the fact that we do have a very minor component that has really disqualified this drone from the NDAA compliance component. So now that we've knocked out the parts list and you understand roughly what order we're going to be assembling this drone in and what you can expect to need for your parts for your build, whether it's NDAA compliant or not, let's get started with the very first step. Let's assemble the frame together. Let's just start with our frame. We have the TBS Source version 5. This is a 5-inch drone frame. You can do an NDAA compliant build with the parts that we have listed here, with anything up to, I believe, a 6-inch drone, and as small as a 3.5-inch drone. Now, the motors might be a little bit big for a 3.5-inch drone even, but in theory, you could make it work if you really wanted to. I'm just going with the 5-inch and this frame in particular because, as I said, it's extremely easy to build on. This has a nice big open body, so it's not gonna be hard to fit the components in here. It's not gonna be hard to assemble. In fact, I've already done this once, and it's really easy with the Source frame. So it comes in a nice little bag just like this. We're gonna pull all of our parts out here. You'll see, just double check, make sure the bag's empty. It's clear on the other side so you can see if you missed something or not. It appears we have not missed anything. In our bag of parts, we have our camera housing. This is where we're gonna actually put our camera in at. And then we have a little piece here that we're gonna need right off the bat. This lines our arms up so that the arms fit in the frame as they're supposed to. We have one set of arms here. We have another set of arms here. We have our standoffs, which we'll talk about those once we start actually putting the frame together for its final stretch. We have our, it appears, our bottom plates here. We have a rubberized battery grip pad that'll go on the top at the very end. We have an assortment of screws here, which we're gonna break out into different size categories here first thing before we get into the actual assembly. And then we've got our top plate here. So I'm gonna set aside the parts that we don't need right this moment. So that's gonna be our top plate, our battery gripper. Our bottom plates will stay just off to the side because we will need those here in just a few steps. We are gonna keep our arms out. That's gonna be one of the first things we touch. We will also need this alignment tool for the arms. It's also a part of the frame as well. So we'll keep that out, and we'll keep our standoffs off to the side as well. And actually, I'm gonna move these bottom plates from here to over here because I don't want them to get in the way. You will need a few tools here. I have two Integi, I don't know how to pronounce that, but I've got a 1.5 millimeter and a 5/64 inch driver here. So I really highly recommend this brand of driver. They've done really well for me. There's also Power Hobby makes some really good drivers as well, some X drivers as well, but these are the ones I've got, so these are the ones I'm gonna use. If you have this kit, the green and the red drivers are gonna be what you need. I also have an automatic electronic screwdriver as well. I don't know how much I'll use this. There will be some spots where maybe I do just to get a little bit more tightness, or if a hex nut or screw does not fit appropriately on the Integis, we'll use this one. I just have that as backup. I've also got a pair of fine nose tweezers here, just for picking up small parts if needed and manipulating things in small places where my fingers are not ideal. So let's go ahead and start with our screws, because like I said, I like to categorize these by size so that I know where to go when I need to go there. So like I said, we do have a couple different sizes here. I'm just gonna go ahead and go through and categorize and sort each of these screws into their own sizes, their own size groups, and I just set them side by side just to make sure that I am categorizing them correctly. There are a lot more of the smaller ones if I remember correctly. Yes, I believe that's it. So we'll go ahead and put those aside as well, just off to the side. We're not gonna put those away because we will be using them relatively shortly here. So we'll go ahead and put some of these, and let me just double check the size on these. Yes, those are two. So there are 3 different size screws here. I did remember that correctly. You've got your small screws, which we just sorted. You've got some medium screws, which I'm going through here. And then finally, we have what we can bundle up are our larger screws here. And there will be different uses for these screws. So that's why I like to categorize them out. It makes getting through this a lot easier. The next part that we're going to do is we're going to get our arms out of their respective bags. And what's nice is all of these arms are the exact same size because we are working in a quad X configuration with this 5-inch frame. So this will not be a situation where you can put the wrong arms in the wrong spot like you might with a dead cat or a different configured frame. These will be pretty much just interchangeable. The important thing with this frame is making sure that your arms are in the right orientation. You'll see here that there is a longer, more severe slope, and then there's a less severe slope, a more gradual slope here. It's gonna be important that you get these lined up correctly. So what we're gonna do to make sure we do that is we're gonna take this bag that has our camera, plates, and our little tool here. And again, I call this a tool. This is actually going to go in the frame though. So this is a part of the frame, and it's a crucial part of the frame as well, just for support and just overall sturdiness. This is also going to help us line our arms up. So we're gonna put our tool there. And then to get the correct quad X configuration, we want our more severe slope. Let me just look at this and make sure that I'm telling you the right things. That's correct. Okay, we want our more severe slope to be looking, like if we're holding it this way, looking inwards towards each other. So we always want the more severe slope to be looking inwards towards the other arm. And that is going to give us that quad X configuration. So next we're going to affix our bottom plate to the actual arm assembly of the drones. And this isn't tricky, but it's something you need to keep in mind. You've got 2 different bottom plates here. You've got one with these grommets that sort of has a little bit of a threading in there for the screws to go in on, and then you've got one without grommets. One is the back, this is our tail side, and one is our front. This other plate is our front, so this is gonna be where the head goes at. And the way that you know that, just a little foresight for you, is that these little bone-shaped slits right here on the outside of the frame, that's gonna be where our camera mounting plates go. So those little plates that were in with that support piece, they're gonna slide in there, and that's going to lock the camera housing into place so that you can mount your camera up to the front of the drone here. So this is gonna be the one that we actually start with. This is gonna be the one that we finish with when it comes to assembling the bottom of the drone. So when we take a look at the other build that I did with the TBS source frame. This is the same exact frame you're looking at here, disassembled. This is just assembled into a non-NDAA compliant FPV drone. You'll see here that our bottom plate without the grommets is going to go underneath this particular assembly, which makes things a little bit tricky when it comes to getting everything lined up and making sure all of your parts are in the right particular order. So this is the front, this is where our camera's at, that's gonna be on the bottom, and then the tail is going to go on top of everything else and sort of smush everything together. So ideally, your arms with this support piece, the little cross, are going to be in that center position right there. So we're going to put this aside. This is just an example to show you what something will look like when it's finished or somewhat finished. I'll put that aside. And now we can make our move on assembling these. So this is the trickiest part of this whole thing. And I'm gonna tell you, it's frustrating and it's going to be frustrating, and you need to keep that in mind. The other thing you have to keep in mind is how you're mounting your flight controller and your ESC. There's two different configurations. Well, there's more than two, but for this particular frame, there's two very easy configurations. You've got a 30 by 30 configuration. This would be for a 30 by 30 flight controller, which are these outside screws here. And then I think this is a 25 by 25 or a 20 by 20. I don't know. I think it is 20 by 20 or 25 by 25, and that has to do with how the holes on your flight controller and your ESC are spaced apart here. So you can see sort of just by eyeballing it that our flight controller and our ESC are going to be 30 by 30. So we want to plan for that. That means that these inner screws here, since they're going to be smaller, we don't want those to come up through the frame with standoff screws. That's not going to be what we want. So we actually want to use the perfect length screw for these plates, and the screw of choice for this particular build is going to be our medium screw. And the reason we need that is because we need to get through the thickness of this plate, we need to get through the thickness of the arms, which are pretty chunky. If you look here, they are pretty thick there. So we're gonna need plenty of length to get through there. And then we're also going to need to get through the grommets and the thickness of this plate as well. So our medium screws are designed specifically for this particular portion of it. So that's what we're gonna do. So to get things started, I am going to do this. I'm going to start looking at the bottom of the drone this way, and we're just going to line up our holes with these medium-sized screws. And I'm just gonna start with 2 for now. Sort of like you wanna make sure that you don't tighten one down. You wanna just get 2 started and sort of secure it into place, and then you can finish it off with the other 2 screws. So I'm just gonna take this, I'm gonna float over top of where I think those holes are on those arms. And again, you're gonna have to sort of finagle this, finesse this. I'm not gonna tighten these down all the way for a couple reasons. 1, it's not smart, but 2, I also wanna leave room to screw this upper bottom plate on. And 3, I can't screw through the table. So that's the other reason why I can't screw these all the way through. So now that I've got those 2 in and started, I'll go ahead and move on to the other 2 screw holes here. And I really struggled with this. I'm sorry, I keep blocking the camera view with my hand. I really struggled with this the first time I put this frame together for my fun 5-inch build with all of my fun Chinese high-tech components. So this was a learning process for me, and that's why I'm sort of going a little bit smoother than maybe you are if you're trying to go at it with no instructions for the first time. That was the thing that was hard for me to adjust to, is the TBS source frame is quickly becoming, excuse me, I sort of lost my grip there on that. The TBS source frame is quickly becoming my favorite frame to build on because it's just so easy and simple to put together. But one of my chief criticisms is it doesn't come with its own instruction manual. You actually have to look it up online to understand how to put this drone together. It doesn't come with any paperwork that tells you how to put it together. So if this is your first time putting this together, believe me, it's a struggle, especially if you don't have a guide for it, which is part of the reason why I'm including this in the build series, not just because obviously it's a part of the building process, but also because this is a little bit of a pain in the ass, if I'm being honest. Now we can put our top bottom frame, our upper bottom frame, I guess is what I'll call it, over top of the drone, just like that, okay? So we'll finish screwing these screws in, make sure everything gets aligned correctly and goes into the correct holes. And again, you're working with carbon fiber and what I can only assume is maybe aluminum, if not stainless steel. So things are gonna be a little bit tight in areas, and you need to keep that in mind. Don't over tighten at the risk of stripping something, but make sure that you got a nice tight bite on everything that you do, so that obviously the drone doesn't fall apart in mid-air either. Okay, everything's nice and tight and put together. That is the bottom frame of our drone. Just to sort of recap what we just did, because we're using a 30 by 30 mounting pattern on our flight controller and ESC, we don't want to put the perfect size screws in those holes because we actually want those to come up out and act as a standoff for putting our componentry into the drone. So what we did is we chose the perfect size screws, which are these medium length screws here. And we put them in the 20 by 20 holes here because we don't want those to pop up out. Obviously, that would cause problems with the componentry of the drone. So we went and put those in. They're nice and tight. Everything's assembled and in order there. So now we're going to move on to putting some of our standoffs onto the frame because that is going to be the next most important part to designing this frame and putting everything together. Some people might argue, and there's no right or wrong way really to do an assembly of a drone, that it would be wise to put our standoff screws for our flight controller and our ESC and other components in first and get those on the actual drone itself. But again, the way that I like to do it is assemble the frame and then add our components, because once you have the frame almost fully assembled minus the top plate, you can see the room that you're working with and you can start to conceptualize, okay, how do I want to fit the components of this drone in this frame so that I don't have any issues with shorting the drone out. I don't have any issues with the propellers hitting the components and causing them to break. It really does give you an idea of what's going to work and what's not going to work when you at least get this mostly assembled. So we're going to take our standoffs out, and you have a few different size standoffs as well. We'll do the same thing we did with the screws here. So you've got these longer standoffs. They're going to be at the front of the drone because the bottom front plate sits lower than the bottom back plate. So those are going to go towards the head. So we'll go ahead and set those aside up towards the front of the drone. 3 and 4. You should have 4 of those extra long standoffs. You've also got these mid-size standoffs. They're going to be at the back because, again, these compensate for the additional length down here because it sits up higher. You just don't need quite as long standoffs. So we're going to put those towards the back so we know that's where those go. And frankly, we have these smaller standoffs. Oops, I almost lost one underneath the drone. We have these smaller standoffs. I believe that these are used for any additional length correction that you need on any of the standoffs. If you want a little extra height, you can put these spacer standoffs in and get that extra height if you like. I didn't use these in my first build. I don't foresee using them in this build. So you can set these aside. If you've put together the TBS source frame before and you know what these are used for specifically, if I'm wrong, let me know down in the comments because I would love to know what these are used for. But that's what my best guess is that these are used as sort of additional length if you need this to sit up a little bit higher for more room in your build. So to prevent losing these, I'm actually going to pull the plastic bag that I had for them. And I'm going to put those in, and then I will set those aside with my unused components. It's also important to note that whether you buy the TBS source frame, whether you buy your own frame, whatever the case may be, or not your own frame, a different frame, they do often send you extra screws and extra components in case you lose them or you need them for whatever reason. So keep that in mind that you will at times run into a situation where you have extra parts. It's great to hang on to those for future builds in case you need a spare, something didn't come with the kit, or you lose a part while you're building it. You've got backups to fall back on, especially with the TBS source frame, because all of the components are pretty much the same from version to version. They might vary a little bit, but it doesn't really matter as long as they go with a TBS source kit. So to add these standoffs, again, we're looking at the top part of our bottom frame, the upper part. We're going to flip these around, and we're going to start with our smaller screws. This is what we need for putting these standoffs in. And I'm going to start with the front of our drone. So I'm going to need these longer standoffs. And you can really fingertip tighten these. You don't need your hex driver for this part unless you want to get a nice tight grip on them. But you can pretty much get what you need here as long as you remember to go back and just hit these before you put this in the air and finish your assembly of the drone. I'm talking with all the components and everything. They can sit a little bit looser until then. So we'll go ahead and add our next 3 tall standoffs. Oops. We've got our front standoffs on now. We're going to go ahead and move to our back standoffs. And don't get frustrated if this is your first build, which that's ballsy to do an NDAA compliant build for your first build. But if this is your first build and you're doing it along with me, the best thing I can tell you is to not get frustrated in the building process. There's really, I don't want to say no right or wrong way to do things, but it's not a one size fits all. You're gonna find processes that work better for you that I might not show you here. Doesn't mean you're wrong, doesn't mean you're off or anything like that. In fact, I actually think maybe I have too long of a screw here. No, this is a short one. Don't get frustrated building. It is a really difficult thing. Once you learn it, it's sort of like riding a bike. Once you sort of get comfortable putting these kinds of drones together, it gets really easy after you do it a few times. I have a lot of fun with this. In fact, I've probably been spending more money than I justifiably should on building drones, but it's just because I love it so dang much. It's a lot of fun. It keeps my mind active, and it really helps me, in a problem-solving capacity. It keeps me sharp that way. But don't get frustrated. You will get it as long as you stick with it and you continue to keep an open mind and learn that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. As long as you can find a way to make it work, that is what's important. Okay, so we've got our standoffs in. Everything looks pretty good right now. This drone is really coming together nicely. So the next portion of this is going to be, look at my parts that I've got here. Really, the next portion of this is going to be attaching the top plate. I'm just going to show you a couple things because at this point, we're kind of ready to go with the build and putting everything on board the drone itself. But I just want to show you a couple things before we wrap the video up. First of all, let's take a look at these camera plates here. So you've got two of these, and they've got these little cutouts here that you'll see that you want to line up in the same direction. So whether you go smiley face or frowny face is completely up to you. And what I mean by that is you'll see that sort of arc shape that's cut out there. That's one of the camera mounting patterns. You just want to make sure that you're able to mount this in parallel with one another. So you want those to always be oriented the same way, but whether or not you do it this way or this way, there's really no right or wrong way to do it. It's just your personal preference. Also, you can either put those towards the front or towards the back. Keep in mind, if you put these towards the back, and you have something like an air unit, like an 03, I don't know if that would necessarily fit on this assembly, but if you found a way to make an 03 fit, if you push this camera further back, you run the risk of seeing these standoffs in your footage. And if you want to use your 03 footage for your project, that might ruin the integrity of your project. However, keeping it in the back also protects it from damage on impact. So you got to keep that in mind as well. There's pros and cons with doing it both ways. I personally like to have my camera towards the back, and I like to have my frowny face on. And the reason I like that is because it sort of keeps the camera angled this way, and as I move it backwards on the frowny face, I can actually get more of an extreme angle so I can fly faster and more aggressive. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put those plates in there so you can see how they're gonna fit into the slats. There we go. They just sort of pop into place. And then to give you an idea of what the finished frame will look like naked, I'm gonna go ahead and put this top plate, just hover it over top. So you'll see there that again, the top plate has the same characteristic as the bottom plate in that those slats are gonna be at the front. So you'll be able to see where your camera housing is at the front and you'll be able to line this up correctly. So this is what your frame is going to look like once it's all finished. Now, obviously we don't wanna screw this down yet because as nice as it is to look at as it is now, we still have a lot of drone components to put on board this drone. I hope that that was an easy enough tutorial to follow along with when it comes to the first part of the assembly of this FPV drone. The TBS source frame is really easy to work with overall, especially if you've worked with other frames. You'll know TBS source is maybe one of the best 5-inch frames to build. That said, it is all a matter of preference. So if you want to swap this out for a different frame, you're more than welcome to do that. I just prefer the TBS source frame at this point because, again, I had such a great experience with it, building it for the first time and doing my own 5-inch build with non-NDAA components. I thought it'd be the perfect base for this build as well. In our next video, we're going to be taking a look again at how you integrate your ESC and start to solder in some of the parts that you're going to need to make your drone fly, i.e. the motors and your power leads. So that's going to be the next part of this video series. If you liked this video, you love the idea for the series, hit the thumbs up icon down below. It helps me out a lot, helps get this video out into the algorithm to more viewers like yourself. If you really like this video and you love drone content, shot by drones, about drones, and for drone pilots, my friend, this is the channel for you. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and while you're at it, hit the bell icon too. You'll get a notification every time I post a new video. Until next time, I'm Chris the Drone Geek, and I'm out of here. See ya.
Yo, what you say? Steady screaming, YOLO, rockin' polo, we